Hey everyone, Crow back again, and I've recently played all the games in this Evercade Toaplan Arcade 1. There are 8 games in this collection, and they were originally released between 1985 and 1991. And boy, do I hope you like shoot-em-ups, because that's what 5 of these 8 games are. But you know what? It's Toaplan, so I'm kind of surprised they had games that weren't shoot-em-ups. The 3 non-shoot-em-up games consist of a side-scrolling beat-em-up, a fixed-screen action platformer, and a puzzle game. All of these Toaplan games were licensed from Teki, a company that was founded in 2017, which took its name from the Japanese version of the game we know as Truxton. One of the main focuses of Teki is to hold and license out the Toaplan IPs. Now, as with every Evercade release, the cartridge comes in a clamshell case, along with a full-color manual, and there's also a mini poster with all of the collections up to this point on one side, and an altered version of the Toaplan Arcade 1 cover art on the other side. This collection can be played on any Evercade device, however, I played all of these games on the Evercade VS using an arcade stick. So, let's get started with the earliest game and proceed in order of release. First up is Tiger-Heli, which was published by Taito in both the US and Japan in 1985. This is the first of 5 shoot-em-ups in this collection, and it's actually the first shoot-em-up that Toaplan developed. It's also the first in a trilogy of games that was followed by Twin Cobra and Twin Cobra 2. It appears that this game was only ever ported to the NES/Famicom. In Tiger-Heli, you'll take control of a helicopter constantly flying up the screen, attacking mainly grounded military vehicles. However, there are plenty of non-combatant ground objects that can be destroyed for extra points, which was actually something that was new in the genre when the game was released. There are tiles that you'll see appear and disappear on the ground occasionally, and you'll get an extra life for every 10 of those that you shoot. Your helicopter has a basic straight ahead firing attack that'll auto-fire if you hold the button down, although it's kind of slow if you do that. You can fire faster by tapping the button, though there is a limit to the number of shots you could have on the screen. There are no power-ups for upgrading or changing your weapon, but there are flashing crosses that will deploy one of 3 power-ups when destroyed. 2 of them are mini helicopters that will join you on either your right or left. One type will constantly fire forward, and the other one will fire off to the side. The 3rd power-up is an additional bomb that you can drop with a secondary button. I was a bit confused because I couldn't figure out where the indicator on the screen was that told me how many bombs I had. Then I realized that you can physically see them on your helicopter. They're the red cylinders that hang off to the right and left of your helicopter. When you use one, it's no longer there. You can collect more, but you can never hold more than 2. The interesting thing about the bombs being attached to your helicopter is if the enemy's bullet hits the bomb, it'll automatically go off. And that's preferable to the bullet hitting and destroying your chopper. Yeah, I didn't mention it till now, but if this is the typical one hit and you're dead type of game, then you get sent back to your last checkpoint. But you know what? They're pretty frequent, so you don't get sent back too far. The game only has 4 stages, but it actually feels much longer than that. You know why? It's because the game doesn't have an ending. After you finish the 4th stage, the game goes back to the 2nd stage and ramps up the difficulty. It's something you'll never really notice because the game never fades to black or has any stage transitions. It's all pretty seamless. At the end of the stage, you'll land on a helipad, then you'll get bonuses for the number of little helicopters and bombs you have, then you'll immediately lift off again and proceed to the next stage. But stage 2 transitions perfectly off of stage 4, so you won't even notice you've been sent back. Aside from the game not having an ending, there were a couple other oddities I found kind of annoying. The little copter power-ups sound pretty cool, right? However, they're just like your chopper, as in they'll be destroyed with 1 bullet. And since collecting them adds on to your screen presence, it'll be much more difficult for you and your entourage to dodge all the bullets coming your way. This means your little side copters usually won't be hanging around for too long, especially in the later levels where it can be incredibly difficult to dodge all the shots being sent your way. Sometimes just a ridiculous amount of tanks will appear on screen, some of them even behind you, and there'll just be an insane number of bullets to dodge, and even without the tiny helicopters, you're still a pretty big target. It would help if your bullets would travel all the way up the screen, but they disappear after traveling a certain distance, so you have to get somewhat close to everything you shoot. Meanwhile, the enemy bullets have no such limitation. There are no end-level bosses to fight, and there doesn't seem to be too much variety in enemy vehicles you'll encounter, and that's why it's so easy for this game to start repeating before you realize it. Game number 2 is also a shoot 'em up. This time it's Alcon from 1986, otherwise known as Slap Fight in the Japanese release. It was also published by Taito in both North America and Japan. This one received ports to mainly the home computers at the time, wherein European releases went with the Slap Fight name. The only home console port was to the Sega Mega Drive in 1993, and only in Japan, where it went under the title of Slap Fight MD, and that version can almost be considered a remaster or a remake, as it has new levels, graphics, weapons, and music. Now, here's the game's story, straight from the arcade operator's manual. The year is 2059. Aliens have overrun the planet. The Allied League of Cosmic Nations, commonly called Alcon, have convened to combat this menace to the world. Alcon has determined that a sole, experienced pilot flying the experimental SW-475 aircraft must defend the world against certain destruction. You are the pilot that must fly the SW-475 aircraft and defeat the aliens. You know, I'm glad they clarified that because I thought somebody else was going to do that. Like Tiger-Heli, this is a vertically scrolling shoot 'em up. However, unlike Tiger-Heli, there are several power-ups and weapons in this game. You'll start with a rather weak weapon that can only shoot a certain distance, but as you destroy the enemy, some of them will leave behind a star. Collecting a star will advance the weapons gauge at the bottom of the screen. When the upgrade you want is highlighted, you can press a button to select it. This is very much like the power-up system in Konami's Gradius. You can increase your ship's speed, fire projectiles off the side of the ship, gain a shield that'll absorb 3 hits, or change your main weapon to a bomb, a laser, homing missiles, or return to normal fire. There's also an option to add wings, which will increase your firepower. However, this will make your ship wider. The ridiculous thing is you can do this up to 4 times. Sure, you'll have maximum firepower, but your ship becomes this incredibly wide target, and if your wings get hit by enemy fire, you'll lose them, much like the minicopters in Tiger-Heli. Later sections of the game are difficult enough for just the core of your ship to dodge all the bullets, so it's gotta be virtually impossible to navigate all the bullets with this massively increased wingspan. But you know, one of the hidden benefits to upgrading your wings or upgrading or changing your weapons in general is that when you're doing so, the animation that takes place makes you totally invincible for a couple seconds. So this whole weapon system can actually be used as part of your strategy to where if you think you're going to get hit by a bullet, you can just activate whatever's highlighted, whatever weapon, you can change your weapon, do whatever, and the animation that takes place where you change your weapon will actually make you invincible to all attacks for a couple seconds. So in a way, this whole upgrade system can be used to get you past some incredibly tough situations. But now, since we're on the topic of enemy bullets, I gotta say that the bullets in this game may be even more difficult to see than the ones in Tiger-Heli. I mean, I guess it depends on the background, but most of the time I'll lose track of them if there's quite a few of them on the screen. But at least it's very clear when the game starts repeating, because there's somewhat of a huge boss fight at the end of the map, but again, that's the only boss fight in the entire game too. But actually the coolest thing about this game are the secrets they stuffed in it. As an example, if you start the game and get destroyed without firing your gun, your next ship will start with homing missiles and the maximum number of wings. The farther you can make it without getting destroyed, the bigger score you get as well. And hell, if you can make it all the way to the first pool of water you see, not only will your next ship be massively upgraded, but you'll get a huge point bonus and continue from a much later part of the game. Between the secrets and power-up system, I'd say this one is marginally better than Tiger-Heli. Alright, taking a quick break from the shoot 'em ups, next up is Guardian from 1986. Once again published by Taito in both North America and Japan, although went under the name Get Star in Japan. As far as I can tell, this game received absolutely no console or computer ports, probably because it did so poorly in arcades at the time. This is a pretty unusual beat 'em up that has you controlling a robot that travels from planet to planet, beating everything up. That's all the details about the story I could dig up, and honestly, I have no idea why this game is called Guardian. The Guardian can't be the robot you're controlling because he's literally going from planet to planet, beating everything up, And without any context for why, it just seems like you're the aggressor and you're not really protecting anything. Oh well, even though this is classified as a beat-em-up, your robot only moves along a single two-dimensional plane, and he's always moving forward except for when you duck or reach the boss of a stage. You can jump by pushing up on the joystick, and there's a button for punching and a button for kicking. As you punch and kick your way through the hordes of enemies, you'll encounter red balloons you can collect to increase the power of your punch, and also floating cross icons that will either give you limited invincibility or a laser gun with limited ammo. What I don't quite understand is why your punches get upgrades, but your kicks do not. All that winds up happening is you'll use your punches the whole game, unless a kick is absolutely necessary. Also, this is another game without an ending. You travel through 6 planets and defeat a boss character at the end of each one. Once you defeat the boss of the 6th planet, you just go back to the 2nd planet, although I will admit it's not as simple as that. When you lose all your lives, you can choose to continue by inserting another coin, but then you have to press the start and attack button for some reason to actually continue. If you just hit start, you'll start a new game for some reason. Anyway, you can continue pretty much from the last checkpoint, so if you die fighting a boss, when you continue, you'll be right back at the boss. But when you defeat the boss of the 6th world and go back to World 2, you'll have to continue with less health, all your power-ups are removed, and if you lose all your lives, you can no longer continue. Regardless, I had more fun with this one than I thought I would. Sure, the levels are short, the controls and characters are a bit stiff, but this game has a bit of personality to it that I like. For example, I like the tune that starts off each level and the way the Guardian enters each stage. The gameplay is simplistic, and each world has its own unique assortment of enemies to fight. It kind of reminds me of those early Fist of the North Star games, and for some reason, I like those too. I just kind of wish this game had some sort of story to go with it, because again, it just seems like I'm invading every planet and beating up everyone for no reason.
Flying.
Wait, hold it. Sorry about that. But Flying Shark is our next game, and it was originally released in 1987. This game was ported to many home computers of the day, such as the ZX Spectrum, the Amstrad CPC, the Amiga, Atari ST, DOS, FM Towns, Sharp X68000, and the Commodore 64. In fact, the Commodore 64 received 2 different ports of the game, one that was released in Europe and another that was released in North America. It seems that the only console this game was ported to was the NES. And I mean only the North American NES, as it doesn't appear to have been released in Europe or even Japan for the Famicom. One thing that seems to be constant though is regardless of the arcade original or each of the ports, the game went under different names depending on the region. Europe was the region where it was known as Flying Shark, and it was known as Sky Shark in North America. In Japan, the game was called Hishozami, but you could argue that it's not really a different name since it just translates to Flying Shark. So, as I'm sure you could tell by now, this is another vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up. This one's more grounded in reality. Well, for a video game. Because here you're controlling a biplane taking down an assortment of enemy military vehicles, including tanks, ships, and other biplanes. You've got one button for firing your gun and another for dropping bombs. While you're never given the option to switch weapons, your gun is upgradable by collecting the S power-up icons, and this will increase the distance your bullet reaches and also the spread of the weapon. The gun doesn't have an auto-fire, so you'll have to repeatedly tap the fire button for a constant attack. Or you could do what I did and just use a controller with auto-fire. Of course, that's really only an option for the Evercade VS since you could use your own controllers with that. Your bombs do not automatically eliminate all enemies on the screen, but it'll also cancel out any bullets that were in the vicinity, so it can actually be used to shield yourself from bullets. You do have to remember the delay between the release of the bomb to when it detonates, because it's not something that happens instantaneously. You could in fact release the bomb and die before it goes off because, yes, this is a one-shot and you're dead type of game. You'll also be able to collect points and extra life icons throughout the game as well. In addition to the extra lives you'll earn for reaching 50,000 points and every 150,000 points after that. Occasionally throughout the game you will fight some larger enemies, but I don't know if they can really be considered to be level bosses because they don't appear at the end of levels. And I don't think all levels even have a large boss-like enemy to fight. You'll just keep flying until you encounter a runway, then you'll land, get bonuses for the number of bombs you have, and then immediately proceed to the next level seamlessly. Upon first playing the game, the first thing I noticed was how much better the game looked compared to Tiger-Heli. This was primarily due to the fact the machine used improved hardware over the previous games. The sprites are all very well detailed and are also animated very nicely. It's far easier to see the bullets in this game than the previous shoot-'em-ups I've talked about so far. However, the game has a very similar structure to the previous games. One shot and you're dead, respawn at the last checkpoint with your power-ups removed, and the game doesn't have an ending. It just seamlessly loops throughout the stages, increasing the difficulty, hoping you won't notice and insert another coin to continue. However, just because the enemy bullets are so much easier to see, that automatically makes this one better than the previous two shoot-'em-ups, I feel. Truxton. This may be the most well-known game in this collection. Well, aside from Zero Wing, but that would be known for a completely different reason. Anyway, Truxton was originally released in Japanese arcades in 1988 by Taito, where it was known as Tetsujin, which basically translates to Master. The next year, the game was released to North American arcades under license by Midway. The game was ported to the PC Engine in Japan, but the most well-known port was for the Genesis/Mega Drive, where it was released in Japan, Europe, North America, and South America. And guess what we have here? Well, if your eyes currently aren't looking at the screen, this is another vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up. But don't worry if you're not into these type of games, this is the last one of those in this collection. For this game, we go back to a space-themed shooter, as you'll pilot your super fighter through hordes of enemies in an attempt to prevent them from overrunning your planet. Again, this is a story you'll only know through supplemental materials, as none of this is in the actual game. The story's pretty moot anyway. I mean, like every other game I've talked about so far, this one doesn't end. There are 5 stages, and once you finish the 5th stage, you'll seamlessly find yourself back at the first. 5 stages may not seem like that many, but they're actually pretty large, and to make it through all 5 will take much longer than the previous 4 games I've talked about. Once again, you'll take control of a ship that has a main attack and a bomb that can be deployed to severely damage enemy craft within the vicinity of the explosion. Power-ups that can be collected will increase the ship's movement, power of the main weapon, and also add bombs to your inventory. The bombs are pretty cool looking, as they'll flash a huge skull in the explosion as it's detonated. Like the previous games though, the bomb will only damage enemies in its blast radius and is an effective method for blocking bullets from hitting your ship. There are also 3 different colored icons that can be collected, and these will change your main attack depending on the color. You'll start with the red weapon, and this is the spread weapon and the one you'll start the game with. The green weapon is a more powerful plasma-like shot but only shoots straight, and the blue weapon is a lightning attack that can stay locked onto enemies once the beam comes into contact with them. Your ship will also change color based on the weapon equipped. If your ship reaches its maximum speed or maximum weapon power, collecting any more of these power-ups will just provide a score bonus. It's the same thing if you collect the color of a weapon you already have equipped. Now, even though this game shares a lot in common with the previous games, it's clear that the improvements just keep coming. For example, when you max out your ship's speed, it's fast, but not so fast that it feels completely out of control. As I previously mentioned, these stages are much longer, so it'll take some time before the levels start repeating. There's also a greater number of boss-like enemies to fight throughout. The variety of weapons is a nice change of pace as well. I mean, it's only 3 weapons, but hey, it's 2 more than Tiger-Heli or Fire Shark. The only downside, though, is that the lightning weapon seems to be way better than the other weapons. I mean, it's kind of crazy how much space this weapon covers, and it locks onto everything it touches as well. Once I got the weapon, I absolutely avoided collecting the red or green orbs. You know, I kind of see it as a downside, because one of the weapons it just seems so useful that it makes the other one seem irrelevant. But I guess having one weapon that just seems way too good is better than having 3 weapons that seem really weak. And don't get me wrong, the game is still plenty difficult regardless of which weapon you have equipped. The thing that I find annoying is that there's no auto fire for the red or the green weapons, but the blue weapon only constantly fires when the button is held down. The reason I find it annoying is that I used an arcade stick with an auto fire feature, which is useful for the red and the green weapons, but needs to be turned off for the blue weapon or it just won't function properly. It's kind of a nitpicky annoyance that I think only a few people would have, but I just had to mention it.
happened? Someone set up us the bug.
Wait. I can't play this here. This is related to the Genesis version of Zero Wing, and what's included here is the arcade version. But you know what? The mere mention of Zero Wing always makes me think of
all your bays are belong to us.
But yeah, this is the arcade version of Zero Wing that was originally released to Japanese arcades in 1989 by Namco and North American arcades in 1990 by Williams. The most well-known version of this game is the Genesis/Mega Drive port, which had the infamous intro added. There's also a PC Engine CD version of Zero Wing that not only has a completely different opening, but also cutscenes throughout the game. Zero Wing is a completely different shoot-'em-up from the other four in this collection because, well, it's horizontally scrolling. I'm sorry, but after playing 4 vertically scrolling shoot-'em-ups in a row, a horizontally scrolling one almost feels like a completely different genre. Aside from that, this one does have a different feel from the others, and that may be down to the game's development. You see, this game was not originally intended for commercial release. Rather, it was used to help train new Toaplan employees, as it used the engine from the previously released game Hellfire. As a result, the game itself is a mishmash of different ideas from different people that worked in different departments at Toaplan. You have your basic gun attack that can be changed based on the 3 colored power-up pickups. You start the game with the red weapon, the Vulcan unit, which fires bullets and does not auto-fire when holding the fire button. Then there's the blue weapon, which is the laser unit, and that fires laser beams that will auto-fire. And finally, there's the green weapon, the homing unit, which fires missiles that home in on the nearest target and also has auto-fire. Collecting the same colored power-up consecutively will power up that weapon a maximum of 3 times. Well, there is a 4th upgrade, but it's kind of a hidden secret to acquire that. You'll also collect speed-up icons to make your ship move faster, and this is another one of those games where I feel the maximum speed is a little too fast to keep the ship completely under control. If you remember when I talked about R-Type in the IRAM video, I mentioned that ship had these force upgrades that would position themselves above and below your ship, and they would block bullets. Well, we've got the same thing here too, except they aren't power-ups. They're just there from the second you start playing. They'll also provide additional firepower after your first weapon upgrade. Now there's also this gimmick in the game where if you push your second button, you can activate a tractor beam that can collect some of the enemy ships where you could hold on to them as a temporary shield. Or you could push the button again and launch them forward. It sounds pretty cool, but there's not really many opportunities where it's useful. Occasionally you'll run into a super bomb, but the only way to activate it is to use the tractor beam to hold it. And then you can detonate it by launching it forward, or if it gets hit by an enemy bullet, it'll just go off instead of your ship being destroyed. Even though a lot of people worked on this one, this seems to be missing something here or there. The biggest thing to me is during how most boss fights, there doesn't seem to be any indication you're causing any damage. There's no flashing bits, there's no different sound effects, and there's no boss life bar visible. Also, the homing missiles are way more overpowered than the other 2 weapons. They're extremely fast, they do decent damage, and they can help you find damage points on bosses. If you're forced to collect a red or a blue weapon while you have the homing missiles, it always feels like my weapon was downgraded. And despite 2 of the 3 weapons having continuous fire, it was still better to use a controller with an auto-fire feature. But you know, despite how this game was created and how the game wound up, I kind of really do like this one. There are 8 fairly decently sized levels. It's one hit and you're dead, of course, but you always get to continue right from where you died. And there's not much use for that tractor beam, but it's fun to experiment with. At the very least, it can let you collect something to use as a shield. Not only do all levels have end bosses, but some of them have mid bosses as well. And yeah, this game does loop back to level 1 after level 8, but you know what? Unlike the other 4 shoot-'em-ups in this collection, this one actually has an ending sequence, and it's quite a bizarre one, complete with its own English. And remember I said there was a secret way to upgrade your weapon a 4th time? Well, it's not the only secret in the game. Well. Seems we've gotten past all the shoot-'em-ups in this collection, and we can move on to something different. This is Snow Brothers, which was originally released in arcades in 1990 by Toaplan in Japan and Romstar in North America. It received ports to the NES, Game Boy, and Sega Mega Drive, though the Sega Mega Drive port was only released in Japan. It also looks as though there was a remaster or remake that was released for the Nintendo Switch in 2022. When I was looking up the story for this game, there were a few variations I found, but basically two princesses are kidnapped, and the Snow brothers Nick and Tom have to go out to rescue them. There seem to be some inconsistencies with who it was that kidnapped the princesses, and whether or not Nick and Tom were snowmen to begin with, but I guess all that doesn't really matter. Snow Brothers is a screen-by-screen action game where all the enemies need to be defeated on each screen before advancing to the next. Whenever I see a game like this, I immediately think, oh, it's like Bubble Bobble, even if the game mechanics for defeating the enemies isn't necessarily the same. Tumble Pop from Data East Arcade 1 and Rodland from Jalico Arcade 1 remind me of this as well. In Bubble Bobble, you'd encase the enemies in bubbles and then pop them. In Tumble Pop, you'd vacuum them up and shoot them out. And in Rodland, you'd grab the enemies and slam them on the ground multiple times. And here in Snow Brothers, you'll encase the enemies in a snowball and then push them to send them tumbling down to the bottom of the screen, taking out anything else that happens to be in the way. Your character can also be caught in the snowball as well, but it could be to your advantage as you'll be temporarily invincible when you're freed. Instead of pushing the snowball, you could use it as a temporary platform as well to reach higher if you need to. After a little bit of time though, the encased enemy will escape, so that's something to keep in mind. If you take too long on a screen, Pumpkinhead will appear and send ghosts after you. He can't be eliminated and he'll just teleport if you shoot him. The only way to be free of him is to actually finish the level. There are 50 levels in total, with a boss fight every 10th level. As enemies are defeated, they will drop items that can be collected to increase your score, or they can also drop one of 3 power-ups. A red potion that will speed your character up, a yellow potion that will increase the range of your shot, and a blue potion which will power up your shot. You get to keep all these power-ups until you die, as when you respawn you'll no longer have them. A green potion will also sometimes appear, and this will temporarily inflate your character and let you steer him around the screen, instantly eliminating any enemies you come into contact with. An icon with the player's face can also sometimes appear, and if you collect it, that will cause 4 blue creatures to appear, each one representing a letter in the word snow. However, you won't know which letter is assigned to which creature unless you encase it in snow. You'll then collect that letter if you push that snowball. If you collect all the letters in snow, you'll gain an extra life. One other interesting thing is if you can manage to defeat all the creatures on the screen with 1 snowball, then several point bonuses will fall from the sky, each one worth a massive 10,000 points each. The downside is that it's nearly impossible to collect them all before the game shoots you to the next screen. In the end, I really enjoyed this game, and it's certainly a nice break from all the shoot-'em-ups included in this collection. I always found it fun to try and get as high in the level as I could using the temporary invincibility the game gives you at the beginning of each level to try and quickly slip past the enemies in order to catch an enemy at top and try and create a snowball that will take out everyone at once. There was only one screen layout I found particularly annoying, as I kept slipping into areas I could not immediately escape from and could not attack any creatures since your attacks don't pass through walls. I would wind up just waiting and waiting for an enemy to finally work his way over to where I was, but usually the Pumpkinhead guy would appear long before that happened. I definitely reloaded my save state on that screen quite a few number of times before I got past it. One thing I thought was odd was that there was quite a bit of slowdown in stages near the beginning of the game. It seemed to be less of a thing later on, but I have no idea if that was an emulator issue or if the game actually behaved like that on the original hardware. Regardless, when comparing this one to Rodland and Tumble Pop, I'd say I liked it more than Rodland, but not as much as Tumble Pop. Alright, our 8th and final game is Teki Paki, probably the most obscure game in this collection. In 1991, it was released only in Japanese arcades. There was a Sega Mega Drive port planned, but it was never released, and that's the extent to which this game existed. Oh, and if you're searching for this game, it may be listed under Senu Game Teki Paki, or its English translation of Brainwashing Game Teki Paki. So what we have here is Toaplan's attempt at a Tetris-like game, one in which pieces disappear if 5 or more of the same colored pieces are connected. Pieces can be connected diagonally, so connecting 5 pieces together isn't as difficult as it may initially sound. The colored blocks fall from above 3 at a time in an L shape, and you can rotate and steer the piece into position as it falls. As you play, the game's level increases, which will cause the blocks to fall even faster, and eventually, silver and gold blocks get added into the mix as well. You'll actually get more points for making the silver and the gold blocks disappear. There are a couple of special blocks that will appear as well. The flashy smile block basically acts as a wild card, and then there's the dynamite block, which will clear the entire screen when 5 are connected. 2 players can also play simultaneously, although it doesn't seem like anything you do will affect the other player's screen. It's like the 2 players are just playing their own games. If you're in the middle of playing a game, the second player can just jump in and start playing their own game right from the beginning. The game ends when all the spaces in the pit are filled. If you'd like to, you can insert another coin and continue from the level your last game finished, but your points will be reset to 0. Now this is an odd one. There's just something a bit off about it I can't quite put my finger on. Maybe it's the lack of control you feel when you get to the higher levels. I mean, it's not immediately apparent when you start playing, but before the pieces are dropped, they'll move back and forth at the top of the pit. You don't really have any control as to where they'll drop. When you start playing, it won't really matter because you'll have no problem maneuvering the piece wherever you want it to go. But as the game gets faster and the pit is filled more and more, the game just may decide to drop the piece in a place that makes it impossible for you to move it to where you want it to go. The timing of certain things feels off as well, like when you connect 5 or more of the same colored block. Most of the time they'll instantly be destroyed, but sometimes the game just kinda hangs there for a second or two before destroying them. The dynamite blocks are an interesting idea, but they come so infrequently that I've never had 5 of them even remotely close to connecting. I don't know, maybe that's the point since you get a massive 100,000 point bonus for that in addition to clearing the screen, but they make a point of showing it in the game's demo, and I can't actually see that happening very often. I'm also not very clear on what causes your level to increase, but it just seems to happen for every second, third, or fourth piece you put down. You can actually gain several levels before you even destroy one block. The game music that plays is also kind of bizarre and machine-like, and I can see people not liking it. But oddly enough, I do like it. I think it fits the imagery on the screen pretty well. Now, I'm kind of torn on this one. I don't think it's that great of a puzzle game, but for some reason I just kept playing it. I did enjoy trying to get chain combos to occur. I actually think it's a good time waster. I mean, that is to just play the game and not take it too seriously. Oops, filled the pit? No big deal, just continue. So yeah, I think I have to say I kind of like it. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is rank these games. I'm going to start out with my least favorite, and my least favorite was Tiger-Heli. Now, I gave it a 6, but I very nearly gave it a 5. In fact, I had it marked down as a 5, but when I went back to look at the footage, I was like, yeah, you know what, I can see having a little bit of fun with this. I'm not going to say I don't like it, so I bumped it up to a 6 and said it's just okay. It's still my least favorite in this collection. In the number 7 spot, I put Teki Paki. Again, I put that as a 6. It's just a very, I had mixed feelings about the game. It doesn't seem like a good game, but then again, I couldn't stop playing it, so I kind of did like it. So, but I definitely did like it more than Tiger-Heli. In the number 6 spot, I put Alcon. I said this was good. Number 7, just a really interesting space shoot 'em up. Nothing, too extraordinary. I did like the way your ship came together. How when you pick up a power up, you're just temporarily invincible. I wouldn't go out of my way to play it still. In my number 5 spot, I'm going to put Guardian. I also gave this a 7. Now, I can see where a lot of people wouldn't like this game. It is kind of stiff. At the same time, I thought this game was fun. I just liked walking and punching and kicking with the robot. I actually enjoyed it, so I gave it a 7. And then in my number 4 spot, I'm giving it to Flying Shark. I gave this one a 7 as well. Like, this is the point in time in the collection where you can start to see the hardware really start to upgrade. Everything's so well animated. Yeah, it's just a really fun game to play, so I said it's good. I mean, it could be way better. Let's just put it that way. Like our number 3 spot, I put Truxton. This is, I think, would be a lot of people's number 1 game. A lot of people talk favorably about this game. But yeah, you only get really 3 power-ups. And like I said, only one of those power-ups is the only one you want to have for the whole game. And again, it does loop. There's no ending. that kind of thing. So I kind of have to mark it down a little bit for that. It's not like I'm going to keep going back to play this one, I think. I did give it an 8, though, so I did say it was a great game. But you know what else was also a great game? My number 2 spot, I put Zero Wing. Yes, I did like Zero Wing more than Truxton, which is kind of odd considering the way that Zero Wing was put together, like a whole bunch of people just throwing their ideas. There's a mishmash of ideas in there. The gravity beam, the tractor beam, that doesn't really come into use very often in the game, but there's a lot of hidden secrets in there, and I'm still trying to figure out how to get that 4th secret upgrade. Also, the game does have an ending. The Genesis version is probably the most infamous version of Zero Wing. If you say Zero Wing, most people think of the Genesis version because of the intro, and this doesn't have that intro, but it has an equally bizarre ending. Yeah, I didn't spoil that. If you want to see that, it's easy enough to play the game and get to the end of it, since you can continue all you want. And my number 1 spot, I put Snow Brothers. Yes, I gave this one an 8 as well. It is a screen-by-screen platformer, kind of like a Bubble Bobble, a Tumble Pop, that kind of Rodland, that kind of thing. I did enjoy, the whole premise of putting the enemies in the snowball and then pushing them down, trying to clear out the whole room with just one snowball to get all those bonus points. I think that was really fun. I liked it. Like I said, though, I liked it more than Rodland, but I didn't like it more than Tumble Pop. I like Tumble Pop more. I think I gave Tumble Pop a 9. So yeah, this gets an 8. And that's going to wrap it up for Toaplan Arcade 1. Up next, I'm going to start working on this one. This is Indie Heroes Arcade 2. A lot of people looking forward to this one. So I'm going to get started on this. Till next time.